If you look at that Lewis-Skelly goal for England, right, where he's overlapped, he's gone on the outside, found a run, darting into space and beyond for England and scoring the opening goal. Let me ask you, would Arsenal score that goal? I don't think they would. And I want to show you the evidence for it here and analyse a little bit his role for England and analyse why actually what England are doing isn't that different to what Arsenal are trying to do. But there's maybe a little bit more variety in the roles. It's something that Arteta, I think, can pick up and use when it comes to Lewis-Skelly. But Lewis-Skelly as well can evolve Arsenal in lots of ways when it comes to the use of the fullbacks. And it's not just from him playing fullback, but also playing in midfield. I want to talk about that all in this video. And by the way, as I do, how great was it to see Lewis-Skelly get that opening goal in Thomas Tuchel's first game? I mean, we were so proud of the call-up. We were so proud of the start. But then to get the opening goal, it went from perfect to perfect to perfect. And I'm so happy for him, as were the rest of the Arsenal fan base. Now let's analyse it, give him some praise and talk about why he could be a massive player for Arsenal in years to come, simply because of the tactical versatility he's got, but also the tactical understanding. Because I think Mikel Arteta uses Lewis-Skelly so often because he understands the tactics. Let's break it down. I want to show you firstly what he did in England's 2-0 win against Albania. Of course, he got the opening goal, so I'll show you his heat map. Very much on the touchline. Yes, at times a little bit more central, but not really getting beyond that sort of width of the centre circle. Very much more on the touchline, but like I said, getting touches on the inside. We'll talk about that in a sec. Let's look at his heat map against Latvia instead, which was much more central, much more in and around that centre circle in those kind of number 10 central midfield spaces, but ultimately still starting as a left back, showing his tactical versatility. Because if we go to his actual touch map against Albania in the 2-0 win, he still had plenty of touches in central areas, some way out towards the right side of the pitch. So even though his heat map was much more on that side, he was probably holding that position more for England to sort of use Rashford a bit differently and, you know, be able to give us some tactical versatility going forward. He was still picking up touches in the box, and not in the box, in central spaces. And yeah, mixing up the use of his position, which was great to see. Now, why is this different to Arsenal? Why is this something I said at the beginning of the video, right? Would Arsenal ever score that goal that Lewis-Skelly scored? For me, they wouldn't. And I want to show you why here. This graphic here from the Opta analyst shows us where fullbacks of each team take their touches. So it's very much about what they do in possession. And you've got 3 rows here. If I take you to the second row and then one along, you see Arsenal there with their left back and right back pretty central. In fact, I can show you now, but you know, by all means, hit the pause button if you want to look at this in more detail. Arsenal and the width of the penalty area where their fullbacks are is actually the second most narrow use of their fullbacks to Manchester City. Everyone else tends to be wider. Plenty of them tend to actually be hugging the touchline a little bit more in wider areas and actually using their fullbacks as more attacking outlets. Arsenal use theirs more to control midfield, but also to control transitions. They want to play out wide so they can ensure that when Arsenal actually do lose possession and teams try to counter, there's plenty of players to deal with it, but also in central spaces, you're very condensed. So all that is part of how Arsenal play, but can you mix it up? Can you do something a little bit different, especially when Arsenal attack down the wing so often? Let me show you this as well from the analyst, which shows us the zones of control. What does that mean? Well, I'll read you the description on the right. It's where on the pitch teams are touching the ball more than their opponents in open play. So zones labelled purple for Arsenal gain more than 55% of total touches. Zones labelled pink for opposition show where the opposing team are having more than 55% of touches, so the grey areas are contested. That means no one is particularly dominating in those areas in Arsenal games. But as we can see in the purple, Arsenal in build-up certainly dominate quite centrally up to the halfway line, and then when you look at sort of the wider areas, Arsenal are dominating massively from halfway line to touchline. Arsenal have way more touches and tend to want to recycle possession and keep things moving in those areas. Now we just mentioned that's also because they want to control transition. You know, there's when you lose the ball there's kind of less space for the opposition to go, so that's kind of one area of it. Also, it's probably a good way to try beat a low block to go on the outside, but I do think Arsenal should be mixing things up, playing through the middle. We've talked about this lots of times before, but what I don't really understand is if you are going to attack in wider areas, why can't you at times get the ball out to your winger, a Martinelli or a Saka, and then have on the outside a Lewis-Skelly bombing forward? Now I know what some of you are thinking. James, we do that on the right side. How often have we seen Saka get the ball, and when Ben White is fit and at his best, Saka will maybe drive a little bit more centrally, commit defenders, he might get sort of 2-on-1, 3v1, and then Ben White goes around the outside. We have seen that before on the right, but on the left we barely see it, which is why I ask, would you ever really see Arsenal score that goal that Lewis-Skelly scored? Not from a position of just maybe overlapping or a winger getting in behind, but actually being the one who makes the darting run in behind, and I don't think he would. So I want to analyse the goal he scored for England here on the tactical pad. Now what we've got is Jude Bellingham very much picking the ball in a central space, a sort of 10 space, and he rolls such a lovely ball into Lewis-Skelly. Dribbles a little bit after turning a few defenders, and Lewis-Skelly just rolls it through the keeper's legs. But what I want to do is analyse the position of some of these players. We'll use the red here. Phil Foden is still hugging the touchline. This is still very much a kind of 3-2-5 build-up shape, slightly from England. Of course, Harry Kane drops in a little bit deeper, but generally, if I'm drawing lines, I think it's safe to say that that's your back three. Kyle Walker is sort of tucked in nearer to Konsa and Burn, with Lewis-Skelly much wider. So there's a much bigger gap between Lewis-Skelly and Burn. That's because Declan Rice is happy to fit into this space. We've seen that before at Arsenal. Bellingham, Rashford, Foden. But the big one here, if I just clear everything, I want to show you, is Marcus Rashford picking up a more central space. Now, could you not see that from a Trossard or a Martinelli? You've still got, Foden acting as the sacker on the touchline. Trossard, I think, is really good in central spaces. Martinelli, I think, has struggled a little bit as a touchline winger. Could be more dangerous in pockets. And then you've got Lewis-Skelly going around the outside. If we show that one more time, I could see someone like Ødegaard, someone like, I don't know, Trossard's, we need a little bit more creators in the team. It's probably what I'm realising from saying this. But I could see, forget Walker there. Let's reopen this, apologies. Here we go. I think you could see a Bellingham just slotting that ball in behind to a Lewis-Skelly on a more regular basis for England, and I think you can see an Ødegaard doing that for him too. But Arsenal don't use their fullbacks enough in those kind of areas, and I think it's definitely something we could learn from going forward. But the other thing that Lewis-Skelly gives us in terms of evolving Arsenal tactically is not just allowing Arsenal, so I'm just getting everything up in front of me here, it's not just allowing Arsenal to do this from a position of, play him at left back and he gets in beyond, because Lewis-Skelly's future is probably in midfield. So I'll show you this team here. And if Rice is your future six, you've got Ødegaard. Lewis-Skelly kind of gives you a little bit of drive, a little bit of guile, a little bit of creativity in midfield. I think could definitely help Ødegaard in that sense. But I could see a world in which Saka is hugging the touchline. Ødegaard gets into his pockets and combines. And Lewis-Skelly tucks in nearer to Rice so that Martinelli can pick up these kind of spaces. And Calafiori is already proven to be quite a marauding option at left back. He could be bombing up and down. And you could have a shape for Arsenal that looks a little something like this, with Calafiori being your outlet out wide. Now, not all the time. You're going to mix it up. Sometimes you're going to have Arsenal playing more like this if Lewis-Skelly's in midfield. Perhaps, he's getting into those central spaces. Perhaps he's even combining with Calafiori so Calafiori can underlap a Martinelli. There's a nice tactical flexibility there. And I think Lewis-Skelly from left back or from central midfield actually allows Arsenal to evolve a little bit by using an overlapping fullback because of his varied skill set, but also by being able to drop next to Rice, be a double pivot and build up when he is playing in midfield, and then you do something a little bit differently at left back there as well. I would like to see it. I don't think Arteta has really tried that much as Arsenal manager. When he had Kieran Tierney bombing up and down, that was one time we saw it, but otherwise we've not really seen the use of the left back in that way. Since signing Zinchenko, he's pretty much wanted his left back to do that. Kivior, I think last season played more, I wouldn't say he was an overlapping fullback, but he did hug the touchline a little bit more to give Jorginho and Rice a little bit more space in midfield to sort of build up. So he has kind of evolved that area a little bit, but in terms of a raw overlapping fullback in the way we saw Lewis-Skelly do it for England, I don't think we've seen that. And I think Lewis-Skelly, because of his, like I said, variety tactically, technically brilliant, he's really, really good defensively too, so you can rely on him in that area, but you can move him into midfield alongside Declan Rice. All these things mean that actually Arsenal could evolve to having more of an overlapping fullback in future, whether it's Lewis-Skelly or whether it's Calafiori asked to do that. But either way, I think Lewis-Skelly's got a place in this team long term. Those are my thoughts on Lewis-Skelly, everyone, and how he can evolve Arsenal tactically. I also want to tell you about the Goonerverse too, everyone. What is this channel? I've seen some of you asking. It's very simple. If here I'm doing reaction, giving you data, trying to analyse and break down exactly what's going on in the Arsenal world, taking Arsenal news and telling you what's important, what you need to know, how reliable it is, well, the Goonerverse 2 is instant reaction on my phone, immediately uploaded, no edit, nothing fancy to it. It's just, here's some news doing the rounds, and I'm going to pass on comment on it. That's the whole point of the Goonerverse too. So please go and subscribe. We'll attach it here in the end card, and of course we'll put the link in the description below. So if you're interested in instant reaction content, all the Arsenal news, to the Goonerverse, keeping up to date with everything that's being talked about in the world of Arsenal, well, the Goonerverse 2 is that second bit to just fill in the blanks. Everyone, hope you've enjoyed this video. It's good to be back here on the set. I've really enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Catch you in a bit.